So thank you for joining us today for the Asia Pac launch for RAD Studio 12.2. Thank you, Scott. Just put his hand up. I'm assuming that means he can hear us. We've got a bunch of stuff to go through today, but I'm really grateful that we've got both David Millington, and apologies if I get the titles not exactly right. We've got David Millington with us, who is one of the product managers on the RAD Studio team. And we also have Ian Barker, who is the developer advocate for Embarcadero. And we've got David at the very beginning of his day. I'm not sure if he's caffeinated yet or not, but he's vertical.
Not. 6 a.m., far too early.
But he's vertical and his eyes are open, which is a good start. And then we've got Ian at I assume the very end of his day, and he is definitely caffeinated.
Yeah.
So anyway, we should be in for a good session. Now, just before we get started, is that pink thing caffeinated, Ian?
It's not my fault. My wife brought this, and apparently it's got a load of caffeine in it, but it's got that jelly stuff in it. Like, what?
Oh, okay.
Coffee is my thing. I'm a coder. Coffee. That's it. Yeah.
As long as it's caffeine and not some sort of cocktail, we're probably fine.
No. Good grief. No, I'll be asleep otherwise in 10 minutes. So.
So just before we kick off, just going to say that during the demos and stuff, we will be taking questions and happy to answer questions in the questions window inside go to webinar. But then at the end of the session, we'll also come back on voice and deal with any questions maybe that we think were worthy of dealing with in person, live at the end, or other questions that come up afterwards. Okay. So with that, I think we can actually get this show rolling. Where are we? Here we go. So I think this is the slide that we all agreed that I would shut up on and you two guys would talk to.
Yeah, we didn't agree who would talk first, though, and that's always a problem with me on the panel.
I think you just volunteered, Ian. So
yeah, take it away.
Yeah. Oh well, you know what? I'll try my best, but I'll probably hand over for you to talk about the C++ stuff. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It makes a change for me to be late at night, because usually whenever I talk to Australians, it's the other way around. I always feel so guilty when we do our webinars, because it's always a terrible time for everybody else. But so we're really excited. RAD Studio 12.2 is out and available now. Some of you probably installed it. If you have, and if you've got some questions or anything like that, go ahead and ask them in the questions window and we'll answer them. We're here talking about the new features. The number one thing really I think that David is very excited about is the modernized C++ compiler and tool chains, which he'll talk about in a second, and Delphi 64-bit compilers and tools. Just to make that clear, because we realized maybe we didn't quite explain it quite as well as we could have done. That means that the DCC32 and the DCC64 EXEs, the actual executables, are 64-bit now. So you've got a 64-bit app creating 32-bit code. We didn't really make that clear in the first way around, but we've had a bit of a practice, so we can we'll explain it now. Some of the tools as well, 64-bit, including LSP. Smart Code Insight, again, this is more David's thing. He's really up on that. Focus mode and scroll bar annotations. But the one thing I want to talk about is, for me, the most exciting thing is web stencils. I think it's a really great leap forward. You're going to hear about it in the presentation, but it's a new way. I don't know if we could say it's completely new, but it's a way of surfacing the back-end Delphi engine, the data, and the objects, and all the kind of things that you should have, the business logic. Surfacing it out into some web stencils, as we're calling them, but they're kind of a templating system, similar to Eraser, Mustache, and a few other things as well. I think it's great. I really like it. David, do you want to talk about the quality?
Oh, sure. I mean, we always try to have a quality focus every release, and that's very true this release as well. Look, just a question. I really hope people can hear us because I have seen nothing in the chat and nothing in the questions panel. So I just wonder if someone would mind putting something in the chat or a question, just so we know that we can be heard.
I just
I can see
waved to
people in the questions saying that they can hear.
All right. Oh, it's interesting. My panel is blank. I have 0 questions.
mine too, actually. Yeah.
I guess it's my job to answer them all then. That's fine.
Yeah, why not? You're emceeing anyway.
That's fine too. Yeah. I'll forward on my emails from tomorrow, Malcolm. Okay.
But yeah, there's more people saying that they can hear us, so thank you for that.
Great. Okay.
We can't
Yeah,
see
look,
the questions.
on the quality, of course, we have a bunch of stuff on mobile development and Visual Assist. As Ian said, I'm very excited about the C++ stuff this release, and as well as the modernized C++ toolchain, we have a bunch of improvements in Visual Assist, which is code tooling, navigation, and refactoring. And also, just to mention on Smart.
Your mic's cut out, David.
You did something. That is actually not LSP or what we think of as Code Insight as an AI plugin, off by default, because that's important for your code security, your code IP. Nor is it really a co-pilot, but is more of a framework. But we'll get to that once we go through that in the recording. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff this release. We hope you find it really promising. So I think we should move on to the webinar content. Hi folks, David here, and I'd ask the Delphi people to wait for a moment because we have some great C++ news. Now, back in 12.1, we shipped the first version of the new Windows 64-bit modern toolchain. Well, now in 12.2, it's fully feature complete, matching the previous Win64 toolchain, and we have even more great news. When we shipped it in 12.1, it was missing one main feature, dynamic packages. Now, it supported static packages, so you could build your VCL or FireMonkey apps fine, but you'd end up with a single large exe. In 12.2, dynamic packages are back in 2 ways. First, you can link to dynamic packages, i.e. just use BPL files just as you'd expect. But second, you can also create packages in C++. So not only can you use packages from Delphi, but you can write them in C++ as well. If you prefer using packages, especially because of the architectural benefits, splitting parts of code, this is great for you. We know lots of people have been very excited by the new toolchain, but have been waiting to use it in full until we have package support, and now we do. So this means the new toolchain support for packages is complete, it fully matches the past. It's a brand new implementation, and we've been aware of how tricky packages can be in C++ when writing it. And related to that, we have several new DocWiki pages that talk about how packages work in C++, including guidelines for what to do, how to understand the effect of something like declspec package, and more. Alright, second up is CMake support. Now, we first introduced CMake a few years ago, and our support got out of date. We've brought it back for the new toolchain, and we plan to ship a copy of CMake directly in Get-It shortly after we release. CMake and Ninja are the industry standard C++ build tools, and these should allow you to build many third-party C++ libraries far more easily. Plus, of course, VCL and FireMonkey ones if you want to use them, such as for a CI setup. Now, normally we'd say Ninja is also a benefit for fast compiling, which it is, but we have more news on that. Probably the biggest pain point in C++ is compile time. It's a very powerful language, but it can be slow to build. There's a famous XKCD comic about compile speeds that some of you may have seen before, which makes a joke of it. While you're compiling, you might not have much to do, thus odd fights on office chairs. But it's not really a joke because it can be a productivity issue. It's useful to have a fast compile debug cycle so you don't lose your focus or thoughts while trying to solve problems. Or fast builds may allow you to have a better CI setup. We've had a few solutions to this. TimeCompile, which is a great tool and works with BCC64X. CMake and Ninja, as we just spoke about, which is really better or intended for using with third-party libraries because it's what they come with. And in the past, batch compilation with the --jobs parameter. This one sends all the C++ files to the compiler in one go, i.e. batches, and used multiple processors at once, which was jobs. In 12.2, we've brought that back, but it's a completely new implementation. The new batch compilation with jobs is faster than the old version, and it's on by default. This means that just by installing 12.2, next time you compile, you'll get an immediate speed up. No configuration, no settings, no changes, just install 12.2 and it's faster. And it will roughly scale with the number of cores and amount of RAM your machine has. But how much faster? We ran some benchmarks on some synthetic code where we created 5,000 files containing 360,000 lines of code. And we measured compiling this against the classic compiler, Visual C++ with Ninja and with its own version of multiprocessing, our toolchain with Ninja, and the new default. First, classic is very fast. That's because it does far less, the compiler is far simpler, and the STL available for it is far simpler. And while we strongly encourage you to move away from classic, we know people still use it because of its compile speed, so it's important to have on this kind of chart. Let's look at Visual C++ used with Ninja, Ninja being the industry standard parallel compilation tool. It takes a bit under 30 seconds. Then let's look at Visual C++ with the /mp flag. This is Microsoft's own version of our -- jobs, and shows what may be the best case scenario for Visual C++. It's a lot faster than with Ninja. Now let's look at our new compiler, BCC64X. First, let's look with Ninja. It's faster than Microsoft Visual C++, which is unexpected. We don't currently know why that is, and maybe it's just this codebase. But it's already looking pretty good. Finally, you might detect a trend on the times here where smaller is better, and you can see a direction we're going. So let's look at what we get with the new compiler using our new batch compilation and jobs. Wow! Now this speeds up based on how much a compiler lies, which means you need CPU cores and memory. We tested on a beefy machine, and you can see its hardware on the slide, over a dozen cores and 64 gigs of RAM. But we think it's fair to say that you should get performance improvements over the default compilation by upgrading to 12.2, and we certainly recommend installing it and trying it out. Now, we are still benchmarking. That was synthetic generated code, and we found while I was writing this presentation that code using the STL was slower. And that may be to do with libc++ having many individual files and what are called transitive includes, which is where you include something that includes something that includes something. Or other indications are that it depends on the C++ version you target, especially when comparing against different toolchains. So at this stage, we're still benchmarking and testing, and it is likely that you will not get results completely matching the first benchmark we did with your genuine real-world code. Now that particular benchmark showed that we are faster than other modern toolchains, but other benchmarks are different and we're analyzing that. What we can say is that in some measurements, as you saw, we are faster than the other comparable toolchains we've tested against. What matters is really the performance improvement for your projects. And just because we have this feature on by default, you should see compile times improve by default just by installing and using 12.2. Plus, this effect will be more visible the more files you have, i.e. the larger your project, the more this will be visible, matched with having more cores and RAM. So, stay tuned for a blog on this. Either way, you can tell we're focusing on delivering a really high quality toolchain for you. We've finished the toolchain with dynamic packages. We will have CMake and get it soon, and we have an inbuilt, on by default parallel compile where we expect to see excellent speedups as you scale cores and memory. 12.2 is a really exciting release for C++.
Thanks, David. Now moving to the Delphi compilers, there is one great feature that's available in 12.2. We are shipping the 64-bit version of the Delphi compiler for Win32 and Win64. 64-bit version doesn't mean targeting or building 64-bit application, but it's the compiler itself that is a 64-bit executable, and therefore the compiler is now able to handle extremely large application because it has a huge memory address space compared to the 3 GB that were available on the older 32-bit binaries. We have enabled this feature only for the command line compilers because the IDE cannot invoke a compiler directly, but the compilers are enabled from the IDE when you're using the external MS build. In that case, there is a new feature. You can determine which is your preferred tool architecture and can be 32 or 64-bit. So the goal here is to allow building a very large application with tens of millions of lines of source code as a single executable. And that's also the reason we have made this feature available only in Enterprise and Architect in 12.2. The same option is available also for the Delphi LSP. Because Delphi LSP is a separate executable, it can be activated in the IDE in a version that is built as a 64-bit binary. So both the command line compilers available through MS Build and the Delphi LSP engine are available as 64-bit application. The new C++ compiler, which is also a separate executable, is and has been 64-bit since the release. So now let's move from the compiler to the IDE. And there is one big feature that we're introducing in 12.2. We've called it Smart Code Insight. And it's the ability to use AI LLMs within the RAD Studio IDE. Rather than teaming with one individual vendor and one individual company and provide you one specific option, what we've decided to do is to build an open architecture for plugins that are tied to artificial intelligence. The architecture is based on an Open Tools API, and in fact, you can create your own plugins for this architecture. Of course, having only the architecture won't be terribly useful. We are also shipping ready-to-use support for 3 online solutions: the OpenAI API, the Gemini API by Google, and the Claude API by Anthropic. We're also providing one offline solution, offline meaning a solution you can install locally on your machine or a machine in your network, and that solution is Olama. We are also providing a ready-to-use Docker image that you can install on a Linux machine or you can install on the Windows subsystem for Linux. What's important to underline is that everything is optional and it's disabled by default. You can disable it. You can enable each of the individual engines that you want to use, and you have a license to use. Of course, before you use one of these APIs, you need to create an account on the system, pay for the usage to the vendor, and what you need to do in the configuration page is add some general parameters plus the individual API keys that are provided you once you have an active account. Again, you can choose which providers are active. You can choose the default provider for the operations done in the editor. You can choose the same or a different provider for the chat window available in the IDE. You can decide to disable everything and nothing will happen. You can decide to use only an offline solution that provides you the maximum privacy because there's zero information sent to anyone else on the internet. So that was our approach, and that is the goal of this solution. You decide if and how to use AI, and you decide which of the vendors you want to work with and you trust. That's different from some other IDEs that tend to offer one preferred solution, at times made by the same vendor. How does it work in practice? There is a new chat window where you can ask like general purpose questions, ask to generate code for you, ask for anything specific. It's in the IDE, so you can easily copy and paste from that result window into your editor. There is also another option directly tied to the IDE itself, which is the ability to select code in the editor. Could be a function, could be a class, could be an entire unit, and invoke some ready-to-use operations on that code, like find bugs, explain code, add comments, complete the code, optimize, add unit tests, or some conversion function. these are available straight away in the IDE. And this is an example. I've written some clumsy code, clearly wrong code. I hope all of you recognize this as not being a good idea to allocate some memory and just walk away. And not only this was highlighted, I think in this case by ChatGTP, but also there was suggestion to rewrite that code in a different way with a proper try finally block. As I mentioned, that screenshot was captured using ChatGPT. Now let's switch to a different engine and see what happens if I select the same function and I go to the smart code inside options and ask to find bugs in the code. The results are similar, not too surprisingly, although the code is slightly different. Now let me try another option, which is explain code. I found that quite nice. That would be probably good for a beginner to, okay, what is this code? What is this button? What is this button one click? What's happening here? And so it's telling me the type starts a type declaration. tform is a class named tform, which inherits from tform. And button is a public field, likely represent a button control on the form. Yes, that is true. And button click is a method fixer parameter and is likely an event handler for the button's click event, which is actually correct.
Hello again. In 12.1 we introduced split editor views, which have quality work this release by the way, which was a reworking of how the editor can work and be configured within an IDE window, allowing multiple editors. This technology has allowed us to add another new IDE editor feature, and that's focus mode. Focus mode is similar to what's known as Zen mode in other IDEs, but we gave it a different name to avoid any religious terminology and because it is all about focus. The idea is just your code editor. That's it, only code. And we remove most of the IDE UI and even remove other UI, the idea being that it is an IDE mode to use for distraction-free, focused coding. To open focus mode for the current editor, press Ctrl-Alt-Z or use the tab menu. You can see on screen in the background what it looks like in light mode by default. It is full screen with a centered editor. And that's it. You can even, and see the screenshot at the front, reduce editor UI by turning off things like the navigation toolbar or showing the blue dots. Again, the idea is to have a focus on code and remove as much of everything else as is possible and useful to still allow it to be just you and your code. Here's a screenshot in dark mode, which is my favorite way of using it. And note we support split editors in focus mode too, and you can use Ctrl F12 or one of the toolbar buttons at the top to open units. So that's focus mode. Remove distracting UI and have just you and your code. We hope you'll find it useful for those long or complex coding sessions. We have some other really nice additions too. One is scrollbar annotations. You can display bookmarks, changes, highlighted tokens, and compiler errors or warnings on the scrollbar. Of course, it comes with Tools API support and you can draw there too. This is really useful to allow you to see on the scrollbar where something you're interested in is, and jump there quickly. Inline assembly inside Delphi code now supports syntax highlighting. Plus, the code completion dropdown can be drawn using the editor colors, which you may prefer if you use the editor with a very different color scheme to the IDE's surrounding color scheme. Finally, we have a lot of quality work, and that's especially around the split views, plus the way the IDE toolbars behave in high DPI.
Thank you, David. Hello everyone, Nuno here from the PM team. I'm pretty excited to announce that for Visual Assists we have integrated 2 new refactorings, 3 new features, being them introduce variable, create from usage, and extract methods. Plus, we have done some significant quality and stability improvements around code navigation and code completion. All of this that you'll be able to experience in RAD Studio 12.2. And to showcase these 3 new refactorings, let's jump into RAD Studio itself and have a demonstration live on how those work. So for this demo, I will be showcasing a pretty simple application that what it does is you input your gross salary and you select your country and it calculates your net amount that you should receive. Just a disclaimer for this demo, every country applies the same flat rate as taxes for simplicity. And as a lot of you know, every time that we are doing codes, not always we do the cleanest of codes, especially when we are doing things for the first time and we are in that flow where we are thinking on what we want to do. And this application was no different. So, for example, here in the calculate net salary event, that is what is run when I click in the calculate salary button. What we are doing here in the first section is to see if any of the boxes, of the edit boxes or the combo box is empty, and it is a validation. So when I look into this method, this is not the most fundamental part of the methods, but is what takes more space and mental space when I look into it. So a good thing for us to do is to extract it to a method for better clarity and readability of these methods. And with VA now we can do this very simple. What we need to do is just to select the entire part that we want to extract. We right click on it, we go to the refactor menu and we click extract methods. In here, Visual Studio presents us with this pop-up that has a few options. First one is to choose the method name, and in this case I will choose run validations. And then we have a few other options. First is I can choose to not select either of the boxes, and if I click OK, what VA will do is extract this method directly into the header file, the declaration and the source code implementation, but is not what we want in this case. The section option is extract as a free function, and if I select this option, what VA will do is create a function that is not tied to any scope. And the last one, extract to source, is it will extract the function, making the declaration in the header file, and then on the source file the implementation. That is exactly what you want. So let's go and see what happens. I clicked OK, and as you saw, VA created the method for me here in the source file, and on the original methods it changed the lines by calling the function itself. And now if we look into the header file, we will see that it also created the declaration in the header file, just as we expected. And if we run our code, everything will work as expected. The second part that we can showcase is, for example, in this showcase, in this show message, we notice that we have this line here. This line is calculating the net salary. However, just for reading it is very difficult to understand, and it will be easier if we have a named variable for it. So let's go ahead and do it. Refactor, introduce variable, and I'll call it net salary. And now VA created the variable for me in the innermost scope. That is exactly what I wanted. And once again, if you look at the methods, now it's much easier to read. So it will run some validations, it will then calculate the net salary, and then it will show the net salary as a pop-up message. And if we run the code, we will see that everything works as expected. And now the last but not least, we will look into create from usage. So let's say that every country now decided to apply a flat rate of taxes, and we want to add it to our calculator. We can go here, we add a new flat rate, but as you might have noticed, this flat rate is not declared anywhere. So if we try to compile, it will fail. However, VA is very clever and can do something for you. So you can right click on an undefined symbol, you go refactor, create from usage, and you can choose to create a new, in this case, variable for an undefined symbol. And for this case, what I will want is to create a global variable. I will make it a const and click OK. And what happened was VA indeed created a variable for me that I will now define to, let's say, more 10%, and instead of int, I actually want it to double. And if we press run, everything works as expected. So let's say 100K, country United States, calculate net salary, and here you go. This is it for VA for 12.2. Next, over to Marco.
Thanks, Nuno. Marco again here. Now that we've looked into the compilers and IDE, let's start focusing into some of the library extensions we have in RStudio 12.2. The most important one is certainly the new Web Stencils template library that we are introducing in this release. It's a server-side, script-based integration engine. The idea is you process HTML files, either in web broker or RAD server, and you merge into a template, into a skeleton, data that is available within the application itself. You can use it to build any modern website using any JavaScript library, any type of cascaded style sheet, and basically any web technology. The idea is that you extract data in a RStudio server-side application, process and merge it with HTML. There are many template libraries out there. It's not a new technology, but it's the first time that a library like this is available directly in RStudio. One thing that we want to highlight is that this can be really a great foundation for building HTMX applications. It's a new library that is growing and very interesting. HTMX pages benefit from server-side code generation. They're really declarative in their approach compared to JavaScript-based libraries where you have JavaScript code that is more procedural than declarative. What you can see here is an example of a very nice HTMX application built with Web Stencils I'll get to in a minute. What is a template library? It's a scripting engine that uses a specific syntax. It uses the add symbol to indicate special processing elements, blocks, variables, or keywords. And then it uses angle brackets to define a block of code. It also supports simple expressions. Let me just show you a very, very simple demo. In the code, you can have an object, in this case, this simple object with a name and a value, and you give it a name, object2, and make this object available to the processor. In the HTML, you can have two different things. One is you can access to information like that add object2.name or add object2.value, or you can invoke access properties and operations within a conditional statement, that value below 10. This is conditional. The concept here is that HTML snippet that you're seeing at the bottom will be visible if the value within that object is less than 10. Otherwise, that entire if block will be omitted and you'll only have the header without any HTML content. So not only you can replace values, but you can also have a logic that enables or disables sections of your HTML depending on actual data and logic within your Delphi or C++ builder application. How do you access the data? It can be RTTI based, as I was showing earlier, so object.property. There is an onValue event handler, which allows you for a lot of flexibility. So when you say add object.value, you have an onValue event handler that provides you as parameters the string object, the string value, and up to you to do any processing you like. The idea, you can register objects, you can register lists of objects, you can register entire data sets, and when you have a data set registered, you can navigate through the records using for each loop like in this other small code snippet. In this case, I have a for each dataset, where dataset is an object registered with the name dataset, and then I access to some of the fields like company, country, city, state, and so forth. You can also define module variables that are available for all scripts in a web module. Let me explain a little better the previous example. This is a web broker application. It has an action. The action allows you to associate a path /list to some code that needs to be executed. The code to be executed is that action. So what we're doing here, we're opening a dataset. We are registering that dataset with the name dataset, and then we are processing the file associated with this web stencil processor component. And in the file, there is the code that was already on the previous page. For each dataset, read some of the fields. This is what you do in a simple scenario. In more complex scenarios, both web broker and RAD server offer a way to do a direct mapping. So associate a number of different URLs with a number of different files according to high-level roles and logic. Before I go to the next slide and provide you a couple of more details, let's actually show quickly a demo in action. This is the demo I was actually showing earlier. There are a number of actions, each mapped to a different URL. There are a number of web stencil processor components. For example, company list, which is associated with this company list HTML. There is the action event handler for company list, which is the code I was showing earlier. And then there is the HTML, which provides the skeleton of the page. Now, this is not a full complete page. The reason is that one of the features of HTML templates is that they allow you to separate the content of the page with the structure of the page. In this case, the structure is in the layout called base template, which is here. This is a standard Bootstrap-based page with some styles and other information that's not terribly important to look at now, a menu and so forth. And then in one location of the template says render body. So that means, oh, now let's add the actual specific page content here. You can have multiple templates, and each page has a reference to one of the templates. The net result is an application that lets you open in the browser and get a list of companies. And then I'm not going to show you the code for each company to access to specific information, and also that if test we were looking at earlier. Now let me cover a couple of more things quickly. We can really go in depth into all of the features of web stencils in this launch webinar. There is a query keyword to access any of the HTTP parameters. There is ability to add comments. There are if statements, including if not and if else options. There are two different syntax for each object, or the ability to define a local variable name for the objects in the list. This allows you to create nested for each loops. There is the ability to import a code snippet within any existing template and file, and the ability to scaffolding, which is something I'm going to omit for now. In terms of template, as I was showing earlier, you can indicate in a file which is the layout, which is the template. Within the template, you can indicate where to place the actual content. There is the ability to inject extra headers in the template, and of course the ability to indicate where those extra headers need to be rendered. Headers regularly go within the header section of your HTML. Last thing I want to mention, there are two main components. There is a web stencils processor, allows you to process an individual file as I was showing earlier, but there's also an engine component that allows you to define a web dispatch mapping with web broker or RAD server, allows you to define the default directory for all of the files and define mapping logic from incoming URLs into the actual files to be used for processing. With this, let me show you a final, nicer demo of web stencils. This demo is built as a console app, and this demo would work both on Windows and Linux. So what I need to do is actually start the server, and now I can hook a browser. Once you connect to this demo, you can see a number of different use case scenarios. It's a very extensive demo. What I'm only going to focus is the examples. This is an example of a very large page with 1,000 records from randomly generated customers. And you can see it's very fast. It's also very fast to generate the page, merging the 1,000 records into the HTML. The other demo, this demo shows a list of tasks where you can create a new task and add it to the list. You can delete. Fairly complete, nice looking web application built completely using HMX and using web stencils on the server. Now there's another feature I want to mention in terms of library improvements, and that's for mobile development for Delphi. For the Apple platform, we have updated the linker to the most recent version Apple provides, and the big advantage there is that we can now link static libraries on iOS, for including, for example, the Firebase iOS SDK. On Android, we've added a number of features to the deployment process, including the ability to compress DAX files and compress native libraries. These are all options in the RAD Studio IDE now. Also, you can customize the target SDK version rather than having a single value hard-coded, and you can change directly in the manifest file. Now, it can be configured in the IDE. Also, the ability to import Android libraries or .aar files, which allows you, for example, to import the Facebook SDK for Android or the Firebase Analytics by Google. And with that, let's focus on some quality areas in RAD Studio 12.2.
Among the other quality improvements that we put into 12.2, which we'll talk about in a moment, we've focused on debugger quality. There are several improvements in the various RAD Studio debuggers, and the Delphi debugger now handles repeated inline variables with the same name, which was a problem before. We've also improved the debugger error handling and the remote debugger's communication timeouts. We're focusing on quality, and these are the kind of quality of life improvements, but just general quality improvements we put into 12.2.
For Delphi LSP quality, before we jump into what we have done for 12.2, I would like to share that the team is very committed in bringing code completion, code navigation, and code formatting to the highest standard possible. We are putting our focus mainly into those three areas for LSP. This version for 12.2, we had a lot in our hands with the 64-bit version of LSP, but we didn't want to leave any of these areas untouched. So we have made a few improvements where, for example, now symbol ints will work in the class interface, including fields. Hovering over local constants and variables will now resolve their definitions, and the engine will now be able to also resolve forward type declarations. Probably in most cases, but at the moment not in all cases. The team is very happy also to share that we have done some internal tools that will help us identify problems with the LSP and to help identify regressions before we put them live. So we are very focused on trying to bring LSP to the highest standards possible, and I hope that everyone will be able to enjoy what we'll do and what we have done so far. Over to Marco now.
Thanks, Nuno. Let me finish by going over a few additional quality areas in RAD Studio 12.2. For the Delphi RTL, besides addressing some quality tickets, we've added 3 small new features. There is a new parallel array class that allows you to do parallel operations like sorting on an array. This can make sorting 2 or 3 times faster. There's a new T-order dictionary, and there is support for the reg_none type in the registry. That's a key with no type. That's a feature of the Windows API that is now surfaced in the T-registry class. For VCL, the main focus was on quality work around frame scaling, around the new forms tab bar component introduced in 12.0, styling issues, and high DPI issues. The work was quite extensive and we're very happy of the outcome. Notice that some of these improvements also positively affect the IDE, which is using the VCL with styling and IDPI. For FireMonkey, we did the work on Android deployment as mentioned earlier. Also a lot of quality work in many areas. Main focus still T80 and memo controls on mobile. We have refactored them for desktop and now also for mobile across the various 12x releases. So lots of work happening on FireMonkey to improve the quality and stability of the library across all supported platforms. Talking about RAD server, there is one significant improvement, which is the web stencils integration. RAD server was mainly focused on web service development. Now you can do web development with RAD server. We have reworked the push notification, supporting Firebase for both iOS and Android. This requires support for HTTP2 that was missing. Notice that to enable it on Windows, you need to use libcurl and not the native Windows library. We've also worked a lot in improving the Swagger documentation, the API documentation that's automatically generated by RAD server, in terms of providing customization of some of the metadata, filtering of the APIs you want to document, support for YAML in addition to JSON, and also enable the use of multi-line string literals in some of the attributes. With that, I want to highlight the fact that quality overall took a lot of focus and attention, despite this webinar was focused primarily on the new features added. We addressed approximately 350 customer reported issues across the various subsystems. We've implemented almost 30 feature requests. These are tickets that have been reported on the old or the new quality portal for customers. And in terms of focus areas, the largest number of tickets was addressed in the IDE, VCL and FireMonkey. We also addressed a number in the C++ and Delphi compilers and in the Delphi runtime library.
So just before we get into the Q&A section, there's just a couple of sort of information pages I'd just like to go through, deal with common questions that we get at the end of these things. First up, if you're looking for more information about RAD Studio, feature matrices, links to where you can download the trial, all that kind of stuff, there's a link and a QR code up on the screen at the moment that will take you there to the Embarcadero website. So I'll just pause and fill for time while anyone who wants to use that QR code can do it. I guess that's enough time. Secondly, we always get a bunch of questions at this time of, well, not this time of the year, but this time of the cycle, I guess, about how to download your new version, where to find your serial, because it's probably been 12 months since you used it and you've lost it. How to tell if your update subscription is still current, all of those sorts of questions. We've written an article covering all of that stuff. So again, scan the QR code or use the short link to go there and figure it all out. Of course, if you can't figure it all out at the end of that, of course, come back and contact us and we'll get you going. And then lastly, to that point, if you are trying to get in contact about any of those things or about anything else, actually that URL will just take you to the website, but that QR code will take you further into the website to a contact us page with our phone numbers and email addresses and chat options and all that sort of stuff. Also, we have to sort of celebrate the launch of 12.2, we have a launch promotion discount going at the moment. So if you're maybe not current under your update subscription and keen to get back on after seeing some of those features, just reach out to us and we can get you sorted with what's involved. Okay. With that, I think we can go back to Q&A. So if you've got questions that you didn't get answered during the session, feel free to pop them in the question window now. But until they come through, given I've got both of these gentlemen here with me, I thought I might get I might get some of my questions answered. There's got to be some benefit to putting this on. So a few things. The web stencil feature is quite intriguing to me. One thing that that occurred to me while we were watching it is whether this is actually tied to only for web development, because it seems like it's a general code gen tool almost. So, you could use it maybe, this is the question, for generating XML or JSON or even code, like Delphi code off from your, from your database or whatever.
The short answer to that is, and bearing in mind that I've only just been playing with the feature for a short while as well, because it was coming along and be in the beta and things like that. You can make it do things that it's not designed to do, but you've got quite a lot of control, because the engine that's behind there is putting data out from your own business logic and your databases and whatever else you want. And you saw there was a HTMX example there, which is a classic example of not really JavaScript, not really HTML, but also JavaScript and HTML. HTMX is the flavor of the month at the moment. And I saw one question that's kind of related to that, which was to do with someone was saying, "Oh, could you use it with other?" It was Ewan or Ewan. I apologise if I'm saying his name wrong, because everybody gets my name wrong as well. But he was saying, could you use it with things like Real Thin Client? I'm not sure about that, because Real Thin Client is designed to make a kind of remote desktop for your app. That's how that technology works. So I think you're trying to kind of solve two different problems there with the web stencils. But the templates themselves are plain HTML files, but you've also got a lot of other things like the scaffolding technology overriding the headers, so you can change the content of what's coming out by overriding headers as well. But I think it's going to be one of these things where, as some examples get produced, I think we're going to see some very interesting uses of it. Already, I know of one person who is writing, a lot of information and examples in preparation for doing a big series, shall we say, on this, independent of us, independent of Embarcadero. They saw what they liked and said, this is fantastic. So yeah, I think it's great. But can you get it to do other things? Yes, you can. But let's see how far we get first with it just being a web engine.
Yeah, fair enough. The other thing that really appealed to me, and maybe this is more for David, in the dim, dark past, I was a Windows C++ developer, and we would compile before we walked out for lunch, and we'd hit compile again before we went home of an evening. So I'm quite intrigued by the compiler speed up.
Yeah, look, I know most of the people online are Delphi folk, but I hope there are a few C++ folk who find this interesting, because I think it's one of the most exciting things we've done for a long time. I've been trying to say that every C++ release for the past few releases, because we're really trying to hammer out a whole bunch of really good stuff. Yeah, look, I didn't specifically say it in the video because we were still doing measurements, and we are still doing measurements now. But we do seem to have a very fast C++ compiler in terms of our parallelizers compared to everyone else. So I can't quite tell you for certain that we have the world's fastest Windows C++ compiler yet, but there's a decent chance. Reality, of course, always hits when you have code that can slow down a compiler, which is why I put in the slide about the STL, because the specific STL behaviors that make it slower than is ideal. Either way, though, it's pretty exciting. And yeah, I do hope with the new toolchain that you see speed ups. Like exactly the problem you mentioned, Malcolm, where you do a build and you come back 20 minutes later because you've got nothing to do for 20 minutes. That's the kind of thing we would like to solve.
I remember those days.
The worst thing
Even
was,
without it being C++, back in the 80s, it was how you lived your life, and that's where all my hair went whilst I was pulling it out, waiting for things to compile, and then they would go wrong. Yeah, it's
the worst thing
I
was,
have to say, when David he got some metrics back, and I'm not really exposing any confidences here, but he came back and he was like, "Wow, look at these figures," and we were all, pretty impressed. Look, we don't want to say it's the world's fastest. We don't want to make big claims and things like that, but under certain circumstances, there is a significant increase in speed, and you can always make things faster or slower if you pick the right pieces of code. So I'm sure that, there are going to be someone come along and say, oh, I've got this project and it's not as fast as you said it was. But actually, based on what we were looking at, and particularly David, who's much more conservative than me about these things, it's exciting. We think that the C++ compiler is going to be something significant, and as a company, we're quite excited about, the improvements and the work that was done by the team that work on it. They're really quite a bunch of stars, really.
They really are.
Am I remembering? Oh, sorry, David. I was just going to say, am I remembering correctly from the presentation that it's kind of on by default with BCC 64X?
Yeah, that's what makes it so useful, I think, because it's one thing to sort of have a feature that you need to go and configure and turn on, but something else to just install an upgrade, and then the next time you press F9 to run, it's however many times faster. Yeah, there's no configuration or anything required. So this is only for the new toolchain. The new toolchain is where all our development focus is going for C++. Just next time you run, it'll just saturate the CPUs. It'll use as many cores as you have. Look, one really important thing there, and we should probably go on to more Delphi stuff because I know most people here are Delphi, but one thing that's really important to us is trying to help people move away from the classic C++ compiler. The classic compiler is the really old one, the Borland one, and people use it still sometimes, and one of the reasons is that because it's faster than modern, other C++ compilers, because frankly it's so old, it does so little. It handles such an old version of C++ with such an old version of the STL. It's got so much less to do, so it is faster. And it has obviously not nearly as good code gen, and it won't produce apps that are nearly as fast, and it only produces apps with the 32-bit and stuff, but compile speed is a good reason why people are still using it. And one thing we really want to do is to help people move away from it, and that's why the on-by-default parallel compilation is so good. I saw last night one of our engineers, because we've been doing a lot of measurements and tests here, and focusing on real-world code as well. And one of our engineers compiled a C++ library called Xerxes, which is a fairly commonly used library, with it comparing to Classic. And it's about sort of like on his computer, the 8 to 10 core level, that's where it crossed, so that it became faster than Classic. So that's the kind of thing we're hoping for. It is, of course, going to depend on the real world, and it's our version 1 and that kind of thing, but we really do hope that this is the release that is going to make you feel that you're able to upgrade from Classic and possibly even get better performance, touch wood.
I'll make all the Delphi people happy by saying I am a Delphi guy. Primarily, I do C++ as well. In fact, you can't see it's blurred, but I've got lots of C++ books behind me. But I always say to people, C++ is the answer you get when you ask the question, how difficult can I make programming?
Hence all the C++ books behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've got as many Delphi ones. But, no, I mean, it's a great language, but it is like, it's a very difficult language to get to grips with, I think, as a beginner. And that's the important thing, that with RAD Studio, you can choose. If you want to be the guy that writes C++ programs that are going to do they're going to get absolutely the very last ounce of energy out of your computer, and the most performant programs you can get, C++ is definitely the way. But if you want to do it easier and if you're like me, not concentrating, then Delphi is also the way to go as well, because it's just very simple. I don't understand why people don't use Delphi all the time for everything. It's very frustrating. But anyway, can I just address one question that comes up quite frequently? And this is from Lachlan Gemmell, who is our chief questioner, because I think he's asked about 6 or 7 questions. I know Lachlan anyway. I've seen him before in a few other webinars. He mentioned, and this is a sad subject, but we need to cover it, and that's Eugene Kryukov, who was the father of FireMonkey and many other things as well. He invented VG Scene and FMX Linux and VCL across VCL and several other things as well. And unfortunately, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, but if you haven't, he passed away very unexpectedly, and it was a great shock. I'd spoken to him probably a month before, and he passed away. Most of us in the Delphi world have come across him at some point, and yeah, he passed away very unexpectedly, very suddenly. And we get the question quite often, which is what's going to happen with FireMonkey? Well, the answer is FireMonkey is going to continue. This is something that actually, Embarcadero owns. They took it over a long time ago and manage it. Of course, Eugene cannot be replaced. But in terms of what's happening with FireMonkey, that has been a long time, in-house and dealt with by us. FMX Linux is a different story, and we're working with Eugene's estate to try and do something about that. We got asked about it, and unfortunately, the way these things work in different countries, sometimes licensing is difficult to manage when someone passes away unexpectedly. I don't even know how people cope, with the paperwork and all the other things that go on. But the question was, is it going to slow anything down? No, not with regard to FireMonkey, but with regard to FMX Linux, it is being worked on and discussed as we speak. And God rest his soul. He was a great guy, and if you go to the blog and look him up, it's absolutely astounding some of the things he did. If I was 1/10 of a programmer that he was, I'd be happy.
Yeah,
there you go.
I've done a little bit with. Done a little bit recently with Cross VCL, and it's actually really astonishing.
Yeah, he was genius. The guy, there's not often there's a few of them, but it's not often that you come across someone where you say that guy, he was a programmer's programmer, and he was. Unfortunately, he's passed away. So it's not the only guy recently, involved with Embarcadero that passed away unexpectedly, but. These things happen. That's the world that we live in. We are immortal, unfortunately. But we're dealing with it, as best we can. And it's not FireMonkey will continue. That's fine. FMX Linux, we anticipate that that's going to be solved shortly. But these things are tricky.
Yeah. Well, I feel a bit. Feels a bit inappropriate to go back to another question after that. But
I think Eugene would want us to be all sad about it. I think
there was just one question came in from Jared about the Smart Code Insight feature. I guess really about are there any plans going forward about what else to add to that? And also he mentions that open tools support for additional open tools support for other areas of the product, so that could then be exposed to the Smart Code Insight feature.
David,
I was just writing a reply to that as you spoke. So, Smart Code Insight, as far as I know, doesn't have any plans for code completion. I know we're planning to extend and develop it a little further, but I think that as far as I know, the chat interface and the text interface that we saw so far is what's generally planned. My understanding is the idea is really to provide a kind of framework. It exposes a lot of AI stuff in the Tools API, so that you can ask the IDE, hey, do you have an AI service registered? And can I then send something to an AI and that kind of stuff? And that will allow people to write plugins that use AI where the user, the user, are fully in control of whether you have AI set up and sorry, there's a lot of background noise, by the way.
Not for us.
Whether whether your code is sent to some remote server or something like that. It is very useful though, I think, for chat and explaining and that kind of thing. So yeah, I certainly hope we'll expand it to something like code completion, but I just don't know. Let us know. We tend to do these things kind of on feedback. The other thing is about the tools API support, and the same question about editor painting. And look, we did add recently a whole bunch of interfaces and APIs around editor painting that should make it a lot more powerful. In fact, we actually use a lot of those APIs ourselves internally, which we figure is kind of like a good standard for, is it useful? And the other thing is we also added some APIs for fast reading and writing to the editor. These are unsafe APIs. The previous APIs were stream-based and were protected access basically, and we added some like some raw access where you can actually really mess things up if you write buggy code, but it gives you really fast access to the editor buffer contents, both reading and writing. So hopefully both of those sets of APIs make things a lot better for working in the editor. I'd actually really love to hear what else would be useful for that, because I think that historically it's been a real gap in the tools API, and it's one that we feel now we have really solidly provided. But if there's more we can do there, we would love to hear about it.
Okay. Yeah, someone's saying they couldn't find FMS Linux in 12.2, and that was the point we were trying to make, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just speak to the AI as well in the IDE, because it kind of is along the lines of what we're talking about. We had a lot of discussions internally about AI, and David and I were involved in those with a number of other people as well. We actually went and asked some experts about it, people that had already produced plugins and things like that. And we wanted to make sure that the company likes the idea of AI, because we really felt there was a turning point, maybe last year before, when Microsoft put a big chunk of money into AI, and all of a sudden everything had AI. I mean, every time I open Instagram, I get an advert for something else that's got AI. Like I saw a pendant today that does some kind of AI stuff. But the thing is, your code it's your intellectual property. It is your secret blend of 7 herbs and spices. It is, what makes your cake taste better than everybody else's. It's all very well saying, oh, well, I want to go and get the answer to a question using AI. That's great. But if you're training it, if your code is training an AI, there's a slight possibility that what you're actually doing is training someone else, your competitor, to have your secret blend of 7 herbs and spices. It's no good if you train the AI on a public AI and say, here's how to make my special fried chicken recipe, and the AI learns that, and then your competitor down the road goes, how do I make really good tasting fried chicken? And it comes up with your recipe with your blend of herbs and spices. And it's the same thing with code. You don't want your code to be going off and training someone else to put you out of business or replace you. And that's why the choices are very, very deliberate and careful. They're off by default. There's no AI in there, unlike Windows, which is built in, and every time you open Edge or something like that, there seems to be a new AI feature. I personally find it useful, the AI in Edge and things like that. But when it's your code, we're sitting, when you're coding, we know we're sitting at that desk with you coding at the same time. Our tool is the thing that you're using to produce your output that you get paid to write or earns your income. So we're taking it very carefully what we do with AI, and that's the key thing that we're trying to emphasize, is that you're in control of it. It does some great things, and we hope it'll do more, but it's making the right choices for the safety of the people that are using the product every day. and using it to do their work.
Yeah, that option to have the local LLM instead of the
Llama, yeah.
instead of public or whatever you call the shared. I don't know what you call the other alternative, but the option to have your local one, and I believe there's also a pretty straightforward Docker image to spin that up. I mean, that's a really nice solution. I mean, I've noticed in the last 2 years since the ChatGPT sort of explosion, a bunch of our services customers have all gone through. It's like been a wave of people updating their service agreements with all of their suppliers, basically saying when you work on our code, you're not going to be using all these public services. So that really, in a lot of cases, becomes your only option.
Don't give away your secret recipe. That's really what it is. And but at the same time, you can't be too scared of actually using this technology. When I did some slides for Brazil, I had a version 12, and I was making a joke about version 13. And I created a slide for version 12 with little hearts around it and things like that. And then said to, and the AI created it for me. And then I said to the AI, now do it with version 13 and a question mark. And it took this very complicated image and did exactly what I asked it to. My daughter hates it. My daughter graduated this year as a graphic designer. It would have taken her hours and she would have made some money out of it. I can do it myself now with no artistic talent. So, yeah, it's a bit worrying, isn't it? But it's a tool, and it's used the right way. It's a fantastic tool. And I think that, as a slightly older guy, I'm looking forward to the days when the robots help me around and do all the complicated stuff I can't keep up with anymore.
You welcome our AI overlords.
Yes, our insect overlords are coming. Yes.
Scott has been very patient and has just very politely reminded us that we overlooked his earlier question about if there are any, when the mobile support in Delphi first came out many years ago, there were a bunch of Hello World type apps to show deployment to iOS, videos to show, basic deployment to iOS. Things have changed potentially a bunch over the years. Do we know of any sort of fairly recent type Hello World type deployments?
Funny enough, this is actually what I'm about to be working on tomorrow for someone else. I've actually produced a number of videos about enterprise apps for Apple, because the Apple enterprise apps, they don't go through the iOS store. You can put them in there and have them as unlisted apps, which is another new thing that they do. But then if you do that, you do have to go through the process of being checked with the quality checks. But with the enterprise apps, you can literally put them on a specially crafted web page, and your customer can go to that web page, download it on their phone, and install it. It needs a certificate and a deployment certificate, but you can do it, and you do not touch the Apple App Store whatsoever. And in fact, the person I'm doing something for, they've just renewed their certificates, and so I have to do something with the app tomorrow. But that is, just Google for the enterprise apps videos. I'll try and find a YouTube link for one, but I've done probably 3 videos showing how to do it and updating it each time. That's one way. There's Test Flight and a few other ways as well to do it. And also there's a mobile course out on Embarcadero Academy produced by me, and I do talk about the different deployment methods in there as well. So you get that free, I think. I could be wrong, but I think I forget what the deal was. If you renewed or upgraded or something like that, then you would get access to the mobile course for free. But it's on Embarcadero Academy. Parts 1 and Part 2. Part 2 is still being worked on because Apple keeps releasing new things. But there you go. You do not need to use the Apple will shut you down if you make the app available to non-employees. Yes, I want to make that. Actually, it's a very good point, Paul. Enterprise apps are not for people outside of your enterprise. Yeah, I didn't actually mean that. What I meant was they're for the people that are in your enterprise. And by the way, that's slightly incorrect. They don't have to be employees. They just have to be people that are working for your enterprise. The people I wrote it for are visiting nurses, and they have contractors and doctors and things like that, and they have several enterprise apps. They've been audited several times by Apple, and it's completely above board. I wouldn't recommend anybody. But don't use an enterprise certificate to circumnavigate the App Store, because once Apple close you down, that's the end of you on Apple forever. So.
I've actually lost
Paul
track
said he did
of
it
whether in
because
Australia. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, in the EU, we are now allowed other app stores. I don't know whether that's allowed in Australia or not, but I think that it should be allowed. And frankly, go and advocate. Write a letter to your senator and say that you should be able to drop apps on on your own phone.
Yeah, I think we mostly rely on the EU to do all the heavy lifting for us on those sorts of things.
Well, speaking as an American, despite the accent, I'm stuck in 50. They're going to remove TikTok. Not that I use it, but apparently that's going soon as well. So, well done, American government. Thank you for your freedom of speech. It's going well for us. I never like TikTok anyway, so I don't care. But yeah. Yeah, so Paul Usher was just saying, if you use the enterprise development account incorrectly, you can cause a problem. Yes, obviously read the terms and conditions, but I've been using that for a number of years for clients who are enterprises. They qualify for it, and in fact, the main one I deal with is a charity as well. So that's different reasons.
I'm just flicking through to see if there was other questions we've missed, maybe. I guess the only one, I think you answered it, so we haven't missed it, but maybe it's worth saying out here, is about the new 64-bit LSP. And by extension of that, I was very pleased to see some of the enhancements to LSP around inline variables and those sorts of things, and having multiple of the same inline variable in the same method, and it now dealing with it correctly.
Yeah, that one's really interesting. I don't know if you know how this works, but when a compiler emits debug information, what it needs to do is emit scope information as well. So saying a particular variable is live between a certain area, that's how it can say that a variable is not initialized yet, or something like that. And so we extended that so that when you have two variables with the same name that are different variables, we have two different sets of scope information. That should work smoothly now. And very, very nice addition.
I like the split editor as well. All the stuff like the split editor and those kind of enhancements to the IDE. Once you start using them, you think, I love this.
Well, that's the idea. That's why we add them.
I know, right? We asked for some testimonials for our marketing, and normally it's quite difficult to drag people to actually put some effort in and do a keyboard. But actually, we had a whole bunch of them because there are lots of people, bouncing up and down about features, which is actually a good sign. It means that we put some stuff in that people are excited about, and this is down to PMs. I say we. I have absolutely nothing to do with it. I'm just the person that talks a lot, but everybody else does the hard work, and I just turn up in the t-shirt and off I go. So there you go. But great work. I think for me the standout feature is web stencils. I think it's really exciting. I think for C++, there's so many good things happening. 12.2, and it's. I wish that's the language I worked in, because I'll be quite excited about it. The split editor, if you use MMX, which is a very popular extension, you'll find you'll need to change your shortcuts. But just by luck, of course, if you happen to use the standard shortcuts for MMX, they do interfere with the split editor. It's just, that's the way it happens sometimes, that there's only so many keyboard combinations you can put unless you've got 18 fingers or something like that. So but yeah, great stuff. I think 12.2 is quite exciting, really.
Yeah, and I mean, even little things, this is what I've found with the last couple of releases, is sometimes it's the little things that don't make a big splash when you read the description, but then while you're actually using it, you realize that
everybody loves the annotations.
Yeah, that's the one I was about to go to, the scroll bar annotations. Like just even in the last week, that's been so awesome.
Clicking to go to a breakpoint by clicking on the scroll bar. I actually had missed that completely, and I was doing some coding today on something. I went, oh, you can do that. Click. Oh, wow, that was really good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
It's a nice little touch. Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky because I bought Delphi the first day it was announced, and now I get to actually work in a company that produces it. So people say, you're always so upbeat and happy. Well, why wouldn't I be? I enjoy the language and I enjoy the idea, and I think that what we produce, is excellent. And every time we come up with a new release, it's like getting a Christmas present every time. All these new features come up, and off you go, and you get to use them to produce code. I write code. This is what I do.
Well, so I don't think there's any more questions coming in, and I'm also kind of conscious that it must be approaching midnight for you, Ian. Even though you wouldn't know it by your behaviour, so that's awesome.
I'm always like this. It's annoying. Just ask my wife.
So I think just a couple of final things before we wrap it all up. One of the questions did come in about whether this recording will be made available. It will be. We'll stick it up on the Co-Partners YouTube site, and we'll send out a link to everyone who registered, so that'll be available. And just as I mentioned before, just reach out to us if you are having problems finding getting the latest version or installing it, or you've forgotten your key or anything like that. Just reach out to us and let us know. And obviously, if you are not on if your update subscription is not current, also reach out to us, because we've got some deals going at the moment. So it's a good time to get it updated. And with that, unless you guys have anything you wanted to add at the end.
I'm good. I think I've said everything I need to say and more.
Just thanks for attending and the questions. And Malcolm, thanks for the invite as well. It's always great attending these events and being able to talk to people and see the interest that everyone has. And just want to invite you as well to email us if you have questions or suggestions or anything at all. We're always here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, reach out.
Yeah, it's actually, I think that's one of the things which has been noticeable in recent years. It's not like people were inaccessible before, but I think in recent years the level of accessibility and openness to getting those emails from people has been really great.
I always say to people, if there's something you hated about Microsoft Windows, who would you email? It's not Bill Gates, but who would you email? And that's not criticism of Microsoft. They're a big business in their own way and they do their own things. But with RAD Studio and the idea, if there's something you really love and you don't want us to change, or there's something you really think is a problem, or you've got a great idea, you know exactly who to reach out to. And that's a deliberate intent of both developer relations and the PMs to say, email us. And I really mean it. People are surprised I answer emails. Like, I can't believe you answer so quickly. Well, I'm not joking. I really mean it. Email me. That's what we want to do. And I appreciate you taking the time as well, Malcolm, to let us be on and meet the people, so to speak.
Fantastic. Alrighty. Well, I think we need to let David get on to finally have his coffee for the day, and probably Ian to slow down for the day. So thank you guys, much appreciated, and thank you everyone for joining. We had a really great turnout, which is fantastic. And so I look forward to seeing you all on future ones that we do.
No worries.
Well, thank you. You guys have a great day.
Right. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.